This conference will now be recorded.
I don't know if anybody else heard that. So engage, educate, and inspire are the three parts of my talk that I really want you to take hold of. By engage, I mean creating intentional interactions with the park by visitors and doing that through the sounds that I record or whoever records, causing people to slow down and listen with intentionality is really an important part of my work. Educate, we teach visitors about the resources in Romo so they become sort of fluent in the resource in the ecosystem in this region of the country. It's more than just a zoo. It's an ecosystem that people are a part of and they depend on. And so we really need to start teaching that side of the story. And then inspire, using all this, using this connectivity, using this education to empower people to be advocates for the natural resource. That is Rocky Mountain National Park or any other park or natural space in the country and the world. So before I get started, let me just open up my screen that I'm going to share with you all. Looks like you should be able to see that. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to jump in. So the Sound and Light Ecology team is our team of researchers at Colorado State University that is comprised of research professors, students, both undergraduate and graduate, and scientists at the Natural Sounds and Night Skies Division of the National Park Service. So we are a cooperative team at Colorado State. I run what is called the Listening Lab in the basement of Wagar building on campus. The lab has been there since 2013. Essentially, we are a resource for the national parks to understand the sound resource, the sounds resource of the parks. And so if a park has an issue with noise pollution and they want to quantify it, if they are planning on some construction or changes to the infrastructure that might alter visitors' experience acoustically, we can come in there and sort of create a baseline understanding of what exists now before that happens. Or if the park just really wants to understand, what does our park sound like in these particular locations? What species are there? What are the patterns of sound throughout the day, throughout the year? We come and do that. And so what it looks like is a park contacts us, request the job, we go in, we set up microphones somewhere in the park, we leave them for 30 days to record continuously, and then those data come back to the lab that I manage at Colorado State University, where I have a team of students, anywhere from 5 to 12 undergraduate students who are interested in acoustic research, and they help us analyze those data. They basically quantify everything that is in those recordings so that I can summarize them, turn them into a report that I can give back to the park that says, this is what your park sounds like, these are the patterns of noise, this is what species are present, this is the source of noise pollution, the times of day, the times of year, so on and so forth. And so then the parks can go on and make management decisions. And so far we've worked in over 60 parks, over 500 sites in those parks, and we have over 1 million hours of recordings that have gone towards serving this function. So that's why I came to Colorado State University initially, is to run that lab, do research in that lab. But after a while, I decided that I wanted a little bit more than just that. And that's when I started to transition into being a natural sounds recordist and science communicator. And so I think sounds personally are incredibly powerful. The science backs it up as well. I mean, if you think about, people say that sound or smell is the most powerful sense at eliciting emotion and memory, but I would argue that sound is just as powerful. I mean, how many of you probably have a song that as soon as you hear it, it takes you back to a place in your life, a moment in your life that's either good, maybe a bad, maybe a sad, maybe a happy memory. Sounds of the park, so many people tell me about the time they were in the park with a significant other or a family member listening to the elk rut, and every time they hear elk, it takes them back to that moment. So that's the kind of connection and memory conjuring moments that I'm talking about using sound to elicit. And so I started with Rocky Mountain National Park. I started this career shift in the park. It has since expanded to other parks around the country, other natural spaces around the world. The top right picture in the forest is actually in Wild Basin of Rocky Mountain National Park. That was the cover of California Sunday Magazine a few years ago. The bottom left corner is Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park. I'll talk about that project a little bit at the end of this presentation. And then in the middle is a picture of me most recently this last year working for 2.5 months on the road along the Mississippi River corridor, tracking bird migration and speaking to people who share the land with those birds, trying to understand our connection, our mutual shared connection to the land across this country, and how that connection or those connections are being frayed by human activity. And that's the Voices of a Flyway project that you see at the top left of your screen. This connection I keep talking about, and I'm going to say over and over again, I believe it's so critical to reconnecting people to our natural heritage, to the natural world that we rely on so much, and really to each other through those connections. If people don't understand what's out there or how they rely on it, speaking of the natural resources, they won't take a stand for its health or protection. They don't understand how these healthy natural ecosystems, natural systems also lead to healthier lifestyles and better human well-being. I think so many people, when they come to national parks, I see it in Yellowstone National Park especially, and this is not to throw them under the bus. I think it's just the nature of it. When people go to national parks, they look at them as sort of a zoo. Well, they're not zoos. There's so much more than that. These are ecosystems that function as a unit, that provide not just habitat for species that live there, but also they provide ecosystem services for people that live near them, for people that live around them, for people that travel to them. They're very important for human well-being. And so I think we need to continue to instill that upon visitors, that again, it's not just a zoo. There's a lot more there, if only we offer those opportunities for them to understand that and interpret it. So again, to wrap all of that up, I want to use this idea of engage, educate, and inspire, this sort of three-tiered approach to really connect people to the natural resources better. And so that kind of brought me to my first project working in Rocky Mountain National Park starting in 2015. What you see on your screen here, in late 2014, the National Audubon Society released a report that suggested over 50% of species that they looked at in the United States are threatened due to climate change. And it was a really big headline at the time. It made national news. It was on the late night talk shows. So it captured a lot of people's attention. And in 2019, they followed up that study, specifically looking at how that impact or how that change, that climate change, is going to impact species in the national parks. And what they found was about 25% of species in national parks across the country will change. They'll either go extinct, they will either leave the parks, some species, new species will enter parks, and we'll certainly see changes in abundances. And so I was really thinking about it. I was just, well, especially that 2014 study, I was like, well, how is this going to impact Rocky Mountain National Park? And I thought, well, I'm here, I'm close enough by where I can get up there and I can start to document some of that change as it's happening. And so what those studies meant for Rocky Mountain National Park is they expect, and they being Audubon, that this park will see 30 new species move into its boundaries over the next 100 years, while losing 11 species over that same time period, and a whole lot of abundance change in other species. So you've got this fundamental shift in sort of the bird community within the park. And yes, Audubon focuses on birds, but as you can imagine, this isn't just a bird issue. Any climate change that's going to happen in our natural resources like Rocky Mountain National Park, it's going to affect other species, the mammals, the insects, and reptiles, amphibians, plants, fungi, so on and so forth. So you're just getting this shuffling of species and sort of wholesale change of the ecosystem. And I think that's really important to acknowledge and really get in and start to document that change. And so the way that took shape for me was the Rocky Mountain National Park Sounds project. It started off as a bird project After the first year, I was kind of not seeing the forest through the trees, and I had this moment, I was like, well, we're not just talking about bird shifting, we're talking about how the park fundamentally sounds. And so that's when I changed into a focus that was not just on birds, but anything that I encountered in the park that was acoustically significant, that sort of defined Rocky Mountain National Park. And so initially I went in to document the bird diversity in the park. We really don't know what we stand to lose unless we really understand what we have in the first place. And so I really wanted to get in there and record as many species as possible, as many different dialects as possible, to really take an inventory of what exists in the park. The second really goal of that project was to raise awareness and appreciation of that diversity. And so to take those recordings, put them in front of people and sort of inspire them, wow them, educate them about what's out there, and let them know, like, these are some of the species that may or may not be here in the future, in subsequent visits. And then finally, taking a step away from the birds and talking about natural sounds and natural resources more broadly, raise awareness and appreciation of that. And so, yeah, we can start with birds, we can present bird sounds to the public, but then let's also put that in a greater context of a dawn chorus. Maybe a dawn chorus with the sound of moose feeding in a pond, in I forget the beaver ponds, I forget the Cub Lake Trail, or maybe it's the sound of red-winged blackbirds or chickadees and owls with the elk rut in the fall, or whatever it is. All these things work together to create a sound that is uniquely Rocky Mountain National Park. And so we're talking about potentially losing some of that heritage. And so the map you see on your screen, anything in brown, it's kind of hard to tell those colors apart, but anything in brown are trails that I hiked, anything in black are roads that I drove. I ended up covering over 200 miles of hiking in the park. I started in late 2015, but really got going in 2016, all the way through 2018. I took last year off to work on the other Voices of the Flyway project. But those are the areas of the park that I have covered so far. What I'm looking for as far as future work in the park, and my permits are almost renewed to get back in the park. First of all, I have to finish the job. There are 88 songbirds that breed in the park during the spring and summertime. I've only managed to record 61 of the 88 songbirds, so I have work to do there. Of the 142 species that breed in the park, not just songbirds, so all species, I've recorded only about half of them. So I've got a lot of work to do. It's a lot of work to cover all of this terrain with all this equipment by yourself and to try to get quality recording. So there's still work to be done. I don't know if everybody knows this, but the park has a couple of species that are worth highlighting to the public. So the black swift, if anybody hikes Wild Basin and goes up to Ouzel Falls, we have a rare species of swift that breeds behind that waterfall. And if you're lucky enough during the breeding season to be there early in the morning or late at night, you can leave them or watch them leave their roosting sites and their nests to go out and forage throughout the day. This really tough bird to see, really cool bird, but it's worth going in there and trying to document that. And then the Pacific wren, if you look at any field guide, I don't know about most recent, but most any field guide will not show any Pacific wrens or winter wrens in Colorado, period. Well, I went in there and I documented a breeding pair of Pacific wrens back in I believe it was 2017, same trail up to Ouzel Falls. They're not supposed to be there, and it's been there year after year. And so this, again, is something, not just worth highlighting, but something most people didn't know existed in the park in general. So that sort of underlies the importance of doing this type of work. This year, I know the park is focused on highlighting the importance of the tundra ecosystem and possibly the tundra soundscape, really making people fluent with understanding that ecosystem. What species live there? How does that ecosystem work? What does it sound like? What does it look like? So on and so forth. So there's an opportunity there to make a project just about that ecosystem up there. There's some cultural components. Lulu City, I know there's not much there as far as human structures or anything like that, but it was the site of human civilization for a brief period of time. And I think it's important to go in there and document the sounds that those people would have heard when they were working back there, living back there, and sort of bring that culture, that history to life within the park. And I think a really cool thing to do is sort of get this elevational transect story of the Old Fall River Road, the history of that road, why it's important. It's opened back up now. It's a unique opportunity and unique experience compared to the paved road to get out there and experience the resource in a unique way. And so again, it's an opportunity to use sound to take people along a journey on that route. And so that's just just one of the many ideas for future work that could happen in the park. Excuse me. So far, what we've done with those recordings, we've built a sound library. I'm really proud of this work. Rachel Ames, I don't know if anybody knows Rachel. She worked closely with me and provided a lot of her photography to pair with the recordings that I've gathered throughout the years. And so on the Rocky Mountain National Park website, there is the sound library that exists. You can go in, you can listen to the bird sounds, you can listen to natural soundscapes that are more weather, so thunderstorms, wind, waves, so on and so forth, or you can listen to wildlife, the okra, coyotes, moose, so on and so forth. So we've got those sounds on there for people to go and explore, to learn a little bit about what's in the park, and to really start to understand the resources when they go visit. So that's up there, and I've sent, hopefully you've all received links to all of this, so I'm not going to take you online right now to listen to that, but there should have been an email where you have these links and you can go explore on your own. These sounds also exist on my personal SoundCloud page. So it's www.soundcloud.com/ and then you can see my name at the top, Gavia Immer. Again, this should be a link that you have. So I have in a playlist all the sounds of Rocky Mountain National Park that I've decided to upload, so you can listen to those. Some of them are well over an hour long. You can listen to numerous thunderstorms, elk ruts with coyotes. There's just lots of really cool stuff. If you just like to work with natural sounds, to relax, to recenter yourself, that's there for your enjoyment. But I think the point of showing this is this is the bare minimum. This is a way to start to introduce people to resources, but if I'm actually being honest about them, I think they're sort of the lowest fruit as far as inspiring people and educating people. It's a start, it's an important start, but I think we can do better than that. And so that's where I'm sort of going to pivot to my point for the rest of this talk is what can we do to further inspire and engage people in the park and other places. And so I just want to keep that in mind. This should be like the lowest bar to clear is a sound library. So a few examples. So in 2017, I started work in Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park. It was, or 2016, it was a 2-year project. We got funding. If you're familiar with National Park Service funding, they're called Floria grants. Essentially money that comes in from visitors. These Floria grants then are used to create projects, to create engagement opportunities that then are put right back into the park for visitors. So it's like visitors getting more bang for their buck. And so that's where this project came from. It was in exploring the soundscapes of Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park. And so what we did was I spent 2 years covering those entire parks, or as much as I could, recording those sounds. We had a videographer getting video, getting pictures to accompany many of those sounds, and we put them together into a film, into a story map, and into another sound library. And yes, all of those are available online, but we took it a step further, or they took it a step further. They redesigned their visitor centers to include space to highlight those products forever. So if you go into those, they've got 6 visitor centers between those national parks. Most of them are on sort of a rotating exhibit, and so depending on the time of year, whatever visitor center you go to, they may or may not have some of this stuff, but definitely the Lodgepole Visitor Center, this picture you're seeing on the right, this film is on permanent display on this TV, and what you're seeing are these sort of sound domes that sit above your head, so you stand underneath them. And I'm looking at them now, and I'm thinking, because of COVID, we might have to remove. They have to remove one of those, so only one person is there at a time. But that is essentially to immerse you in those sounds. And so the film has no narration. It's just really cool sounds, really cool imagery, and it's a way to introduce people to the parks in sort of a more inspiring way. So that's there permanently. As you walk through other exhibits, the sounds play through speakers constantly on a loop. And so they're really trying to get more life out of those recordings. I encourage you to check out this film. It's 8-9 minutes, something like that. Again, it's in the list of links that I sent around. This is the story map. I don't know how many of you are familiar with story maps, but essentially they are sort of an interactive, immersive web experience. And so as you view them, and I'm going to pull one up here. Let me just go ahead and see if I can, how do I do this? Stop sharing. Let me exit out of this. Let me pull up that. And then let's share the screen. So this is, let me make it go full screen. No, bear with me for one moment. There we go. This is a story map. As you scroll through with your mouse, it takes you through whatever story you want the visitors to go along. And so this particular story map takes visitors along the Middle Fork Trail. It's a trail in the park. It starts at about 1,500 feet of elevation. It works up to 14,000 feet of elevation. And along the way, you can see at the top of your screen, we take them through each of those major eco zones. So the foothills, the montane ecozone, subalpine, alpine. And within each one, so if we go to the foothills, we start with a map of that particular ecozone. You can see anything in orange here is the foothills, so visitors can orient themselves quickly. We see in black the trail that we're going to follow, the elevation. And as you scroll through, we start to talk about each ecosystem. We start to educate them about the resources there. There's some cultural components in this particular story map where you can hear the story and hear the sounds of these bedrock mortars at Hospital Rock. As we move along, there are sounds of dawn chorus, so in the blue oak woodland, which is a really fantastic threatened ecosystem in Southern California. We talk about the species. You can listen to each one. There are different sounds, so on and so forth. We talk about migration. If we go up to the alpine ecozone, I'm going to skip ahead for the sake of time. Let's see. We talk about a watershed, and so this goes back to ecosystem services. So helping people understand keeping the parks protected, keeping those resources clean and pristine. It also helps the people downstream, literally, because the water that they're drinking, the water that's used for those farms downstream, starts up in the parks, up in this alpine zone. And so we talk about that. We're trying to connect the resources to people's lives and to people's health, while again continuing to teach them about climate change, the species that are imperiled. So these are pika videos and sounds. And we spent 2-3 days up at 13,000 feet chasing is the wrong word, following carefully and strategically bighorn sheep, trying to film and record the sounds of that rut, which is really a unique and awesome experience, especially unique because the Sierra bighorn sheep is a subpopulation, a subspecies it may still be threatened, and so bringing that to light. So this is a story map. This one takes about an hour and a half to go through. If you really take your time, you can scroll through them quicker depending on what your goals are. And again, these story maps are on rotation between those visitor centers. They have what are essentially on pedestals, iPads with headphones, and people can go and they can sit and they can listen and they can scroll through and they can experience the parks that way. And so it's just a really, really cool, unique way to engage people in a different manner. Lewis and Clark National Historical Park, I worked there in 2017. They are currently, with my help, building a story map for their visitor centers. They're also redesigning the visitor center to include those sounds. And then the project I talked about at the beginning, the Voices of a Flyway project. On our website, we have 6 story maps that I built for each of the 6 ecosystems that we highlighted along our 2.5-month journey up the Mississippi River. So I know how to build these, I know how effective they can be, and I know how powerful they can be with the information that they provide and how they can sort of capture people's imagination. So it's just something I think the park and other places can start to use as a way to engage people. So let me get out of this real quick, go back to my talk. Okay. All right. And then finally, they also have a sound library that's online. It's also found at the end of their story maps. So if you scroll to the end of the story maps, the sound library pops up. I like this sound library a lot because, yes, all the sounds are featured there, just like with the Rocky Mountain National Park sound library, but they're presented in a way that's a little bit more engaging. You can see these sounds. So these symbols that you see are all the different sounds that we've re-recorded. There's 265 recordings there. So they put those sounds in space. So there's a little incentive to get people out there to explore, to search, to sort of sit down and listen and slow down and try to find those unique sounds. All of these products, so the film, the story map, the library, all of them have tens of thousands of views as of last year. I haven't been able to update it this year with COVID going on. They've had a lot of great feedback that's been really positive. And so again, I think this is a really cool way to start to engage visitors. Moving to Yellowstone National Park in 2016, I put a grant together with the park to create the Sounds of Nature and Stories from Science project. And the idea was to train undergraduate researchers from Colorado State University to become science communicators, to become natural sounds recordists, and to use those skills to create sort of media for Yellowstone National Park that engages visitors. And so the picture on the left, the 2 young ladies in the front are the 2 students who we hired. The one on the right, she was a freshman when we hired her, and she stayed all 4 years of her undergraduate experience and of the project. And then the one on the left was a senior when we hired her, so she only stayed a year. The rest of the team on the far left is a radio producer from Lander, Wyoming. The person holding up the recorder in the middle, she is an incredible storyteller, audio producer, Jennifer Jarrett. She works closely with Yellowstone National Park. She and I are the ones that put the project together, and then the rest are park staff at different levels who had some sort of impact on the project. What we did was with these young ladies, we had 2 workshops in the park where we taught them how to record sounds. We taught them how to use the equipment. We taught them how to interact with wildlife safely. How to get clean recordings. We brought them into the studio. We taught them how to do voiceover work, and then we taught them how to use the software to put together sort of these audio pieces. And what you see on the right is what Yellowstone decided to do with some of these products. We created what are called audio postcards, and essentially what audio postcards are, they're short audio snippets that are paired with some narration that describes what they're hearing, maybe a little bit of information, why it's relevant, so on and so forth. But it's mostly just the sound that is the star. And then we've used park photography to pair that and create these little social media pieces. And so you can see this one here, it was the elk rut. We chose to highlight. It's covered up by my presenter meeting. Maybe I can move this. Yeah. And so you could see just after 17 hours when this was posted, there were over 60,000 views, well, hundreds of comments, and nearly all of them, I know some of these things can be controversial for whatever reason, but nearly all of the comments were extremely positive. And if you scroll through them, what you saw was a lot of people that felt inspired to go experience the elk rut. And I think it's our job then to make sure it's not just, again, a zoo where they go watch it, but to teach about it, to give them that information, to put that into context. And so we created, or I should say the students created 22 of those audio postcards that are there for the park to use. And so it was really a social media approach. It's slightly different than what Sequoia and Kings Canyon did, although they can use and have used social media to advertise what we've done. But that was their focus in Yellowstone. And then one of the recordings I made in the park turned into an opportunity to educate and engage the public in a slightly different way. The first recording I ever made of a wolf in Yellowstone National Park was the female 926F, who was shot and killed just outside the park boundary in November of 2018. I took that moment and that recording as an opportunity to write a piece to sort of memorialize her importance to the ecosystem, her importance to people who worked with her, and really just to inspire people to understand wolves from a different perspective. And so I wrote that piece, and it was submitted and published in High Country News. And there was obviously some controversy, but there was by far and away so much support and sort of engagement, not in just that recording, but in understanding wolves from a different perspective moving forward. And so I think using the sounds as an opportunity to do things like that, to try to heal divides, is really important. I've done similar audio postcards for Rocky Mountain National Park. They sit on my SoundCloud page. They sit on our research team's website. They're called call notes. Instead of doing all sounds, I focused on the birds of Rocky Mountain National Park. I started narrating them, but then I had my students, all of my students, start to create their own pieces so they can get more practice creating science communication pieces. We started producing them in Spanish, so we reach even broader audience. And so those are sitting there waiting to be used however the park or whoever thinks they could be used. And I think it's another good opportunity. And then finally, what I'll talk about just real briefly here, how am I on time? Okay, we're got about 5 minutes. Okay, I think there are opportunities that we need to think about and be prepared to seize upon. And so I know COVID has been a horrible thing for the country, but from a natural science perspective, it's been an opportunity to really understand the impact of human influence on wildlife. And Nancy alluded to this at the beginning. So I just happened to have one of these units out in the field in a natural area behind my house starting in January before COVID happened, just to record continuously to understand the sounds of this natural area. But what happened is it gave us an opportunity to understand when lockdown happened, okay, what is the change in traffic? What is the change in the soundscape of this particular natural area? How does that impact wildlife? So those are things I'm going to look at moving forward. The screen that you're seeing, these are called spectrograms. I'm showing you a spectrogram from the first 5 months of this project. And essentially the way to interpret it, anything across the x-axis along the bottom is time, anything across the y-axis, this is frequency, so low sounds like deep sounds, high frequency sounds, and the brightness indicates how loud something is. And so you can see in January there's not much going on. Pay particular close attention up here where birds would be. February, there's not much going on. This is actually wind. But then in March, you start to see some patterns here. April, it really starts to get brighter. And then in May, it's really starting to get complex and bright. And essentially what we're doing is we're documenting bird migration. So as species come back to this natural area, you're seeing their voices show up. And so we can turn those recordings into data that can help us understand the patterns of migration, not just in this year, but across years. We can see which species are present, which species are not present. So I think this is an opportunity, not just in the context of COVID, outside the context of COVID, to use sound as a way to track some really cool and important events. So if we think back to 2017, the eclipse that happened, having sound recorders, and on the right here, you can see one of the recording devices from Wildlife Acoustics. Having those out in the field recording, we can then see, well, how does the eclipse impact species? What sounds come and go during that? We can document the impact of extreme weather events, floods and droughts, and so on and so forth. And even fire. If fire happens in the park, it happens in a lot of parks, especially in the West, we can document its impact both before, during, and after. And so the last thing I'll talk about just real briefly, it's something we did again in Sequoia National Park, is to try to understand the impact of fire on the resource. So my students not just are not just focused on the work that I mentioned at the beginning, they also are young scientists interested in answering their own questions. And so we give them that opportunity. And so a couple of the students, they seized upon that, and they wanted to help the park understand, okay, so in 2015, there was the rough fire. It's a big wildfire that burned through the park, but it also happened to burn through areas that had prescribed fires semi-annually before this fire happened. And so it created a natural experiment to understand community rebound after intense fires, both in areas that had prescribed fire beforehand and areas that had not. And so what you're seeing here on the left are this blue and red set of dots. So each dot represents an acoustic complexity index. Essentially what it is, I showed you those spectrograms with all the bird song. We can take a spectrogram with all that bird song and distill it into a single value that represents how complex or how much bird song there was there. So January would have a really small number, May would have a really big number because there's more complexity to that soundscape at that time. And so we can see seasonal patterns. So at the far left, if you look down, this is June, early June, when you would expect there to be most bird song. And as the summer progresses into winter, that complexity drops. Not a lot of bird song going on. And then the next year it picks back up, and then it keeps cycling up and down like that. Well, you can see with prescribed fire, the blue dots, the top set of dots, sorry for anybody who may be colorblind, that top set of dots, the complexity rebounded much more quickly with prescribed fire present before the wildfire. And so we can use this as a tool to help the public understand the importance of prescribed fire and how it impacts the bird community and certainly other communities as well. On the right here, again, you can see the red, the deeper the red, the higher the complexity, the bigger the number. And again, with prescribed fire on top up here, you can see during the day, so it's really bright real early in the morning, 5, 6, 7 a.m., how much brighter that is on the bottom when there is no prescribed fire. So you get these seasonal and diel patterns. And so we can start to teach people about how to interpret the soundscape and what that means and what fire means for a soundscape in this particular instance. And then we can, if we want to dive in and drill down even further, we can look at individual species. How did species respond to the rough fire with prescribed fire, again, the blue or the bars on the left, or without prescribed fire? Some species came in and they did better when prescribed fire was not there, and some species they did much better when prescribed fire was there beforehand. So it's always a mixed bag, but we don't understand that unless we go in there and try to work to understand it. And so again, I'll leave it there, leave some time for questions. I would just hopefully inspire you all to look for different ways to use sound to engage, educate, and inspire people to learn more, to get involved more with the natural resource that is Rocky Mountain National Park, the surrounding areas, and really across the country. Yeah, and so I'd love to take your questions, comments, and yeah, we'll go from there.
There is one question, Jacob. It looks like, can you give an example of sound's impact on the brain?
Yeah, so I'm trying to, there we go. Let me blow this up. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what they mean, but I think what they mean is, how does it trigger emotion? How does it trigger memory? It's not, well, I am not a neurobiologist. The way I understand it is that there are pathways that are laid down throughout our lives that when associated, especially with, I believe it might be the limbic system, but it's one of the brain systems that are associated with sound, that are associated with smell, those two especially, they get sort of entwined together. And so they almost come as a package deal. So when that sound happens again, it triggers that emotion, it triggers that memory that was associated with it during a powerful moment in your earlier life. And so that's what I mean by using sound to bring up these good memories, bring up these good emotions, or even if they're tough emotions, maybe it's an opportunity for people to heal, to learn, whatever. And so that's kind of the science, a little bit of the science behind it, and that's the approach that I'm coming from.
So I'm gonna, oh, there might be more. Ooh, could you give us the name of your SoundCloud page again?
Yeah, I wonder, do you think I'm allowed to type down there? Let me see.
I think if you share your screen and you can type, or you can also type in the chat box, which is easiest to just send it to everyone. There we go.
Yeah, so I put it in the chat box. It's www.soundcloud.com/Gavia immer. Gavia immer is the Latin name of the common loon. It's my favorite species of anything. It's my favorite sound in the world. It's it's one of those sounds that whenever I hear a loon, I think back to when I think it was 12, the first time I heard one fishing with my dad in northern Michigan, and it just takes me back to that moment. So that's exactly sort of why I sort of believe in the power of this.
Nice. So Sharon has a question that says, I've noticed even different birds coming to my backyard. Is that because there is less traffic around?
We don't know. So this has been a very unique event. It's been an experiment that we really have never had the opportunity to do at this scale. I mean, we can do it in small scales by shutting down certain areas of the park, shutting down certain roads because of X, Y, or Z. But at this scale, we've never really had this opportunity. And so I think a lot of us are still gathering data. And I think we'll learn a little bit more about that. And I think there'll certainly see over the next 6 months to a year a lot of studies that come out to show what was this impact. Was it the lack of sound because of traffic? Was it the visual impact of traffic that was scaring off a lot of animals, including birds, from going into certain areas? We don't know what this quarantine, this pandemic will have an impact, but it's certainly possible. It could be also that it's a unique year for migration. Weather patterns differ from year to year, and so we get birds showing up at different times in different amounts depending on wind and rain patterns and so on and so forth. So it's not as straightforward as that, but there certainly is a possibility that changes in people's activity has had an impact.
Great answer. Any other questions, folks? I can attempt to unmute people if you also want to ask it out loud.
Yeah, people can certainly jump in.
You must have done such a great job that nobody.
It's kind of abstract. I mean, in some ways, it's hard to wrap your head around. I mean, at least when I first started, I wrestled with, well, this just seems kind of, for lack of a technical term, like floofy, or like what is the hard science behind this? What are the actual impacts of this? And I struggled with that for a while, but the more I've done this work, the more I've created pieces to engage people, the more feedback I've got, and the more people start to talk to me in sort of fluent terms about sounds and soundscapes. It reaffirms that this is the right approach, or at least one of the right approaches we can use to get people more educated about the resource and inspired to protect them.
That's a great segue to this additional question that says, do you have any suggestions on how we as rangers and volunteers can connect visitors to the soundscape while in person in the park?
Yeah, I think that starts with rangers and any other visitors connecting themselves. And I think those personal stories, those personal experiences go a long way to inspiring the people you interact with. And so I'm telling you, I've been in that park, I don't know how many times, for how many hours. So many cool things happen constantly. I mean, I have been, and I know the rules about staying away from wildlife and distances, but like, I'm so quiet and I'm stealthy back there. I end up with these incredible interactions with wildlife that you just don't get any other way unless you sit there with intentionality, unless you sit there quietly for a period of time to really let that place speak to you, to get into you. And I'm not, this makes me sound so much more woo-woo or whatever than I really am. I'm a scientist, but like, I'm starting to come into that side of understanding like there's more to it than just numbers and figures and data. There's that human side, that natural heritage that we all have. So start to have those experiences yourself. Go out there in your off days, or even when you're working, sit there, be patient, go out there. The best thing you can do is learn how to be uncomfortable. Like, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Deal with the mosquitoes, deal with the uncomfortable weather, sit through a thunderstorm safely, however that may be. Get out there really early, stay out there really late, and you'll experience the park in a way that it's incredible. And so then you can take it to people, do it in a responsible way, teach them how to have those engagement opportunities. And I think that's the first step. It doesn't have to be, this textbook of information. Just teach them how to reconnect in meaningful ways.
Great. We have another question that says, can volunteers help you this summer?
Well, so there's a possibility for sure. There's always an opportunity for help. I don't know what my summer looks like yet. We're still trying to get permits through. I know they'll come through. Then I have to, to get in, if we do tundra work, we have to wait till that opens up, until it's accessible. I have, there's some things that have to fall into place. The one part of that is it's hard to work as a group, just because, especially if you're trying to get these unique sound events that may scare wildlife, it's harder to sneak around stealthily and sort of blend into the environment. But I think there's an opportunity, especially if the park has resources, to put up recorders, to change media in those recorders, batteries or sound cards, to make observations, to host events, listening walks. One of the easiest things the park can do is set up a table when it's safe with COVID, under all those stipulations, but set up an opportunity for a small group of people to go for a walk along a stream, on a mountainside, whatever it is, and just go on a listening walk. What do you hear, including natural and non-natural? How do those sounds impact you? What do you like? What don't you like? Are there any fears that you might have? So on and so forth. It's just, again, it's another way of teaching people to engage with the park in a different way. And I've held those walks in the park, and we don't get huge numbers, because I found that I hold them too early in the morning at 6 a.m. But I found that the people we do get are inspired to go about their time in the park in a different way. And so that's something that could be easily done.
Great. Any other questions out there? These are all great questions.
That might be it.
It could be. What are the your SoundCloud account considered public domain?
They are. Well, so any of the ones I've recorded while working doing these projects. So the Romo, Sequoia Kings Canyon, Lewis and Clark, Yellowstone, any of those are. They've been funded by taxpayer money. They have been provided by permits, or allowed by permits. So yes, anybody who's reached out to me to try to get those recordings, I've gladly shared them, and they should be shared, because they are in the public domain.
Great. All right, we'll wait our another 8 long weeks. More questions. They could be typing furiously right now, Jacob.
Yeah.
Oh, they are. Oh, I will listen again to my favorite clips and with renewed interest and enjoyment. Oh, that's a lovely comment.
Thanks, Dave. And anybody who wants to go on there and listen, I mean, there's stuff from obviously national parks around the country, but also in Mexico, Costa Rica, Trinidad. Just when you listen to them, put on a pair of headphones. I urge everybody, do not use your cell phone, do not use your laptop. Put on headphones, because they're meant to be immersive. They're in stereo, and they will take you to that place with much more enjoyment and interaction. And so always wear headphones, and just be patient with them. Just sit there, enjoy, and listen while you work, whatever. I wrote a piece in The Hill about 3 weeks ago, and it was all about using natural sounds as a way to heal. as a way to boost your immune system. And I think right now during this pandemic, it's a great opportunity to use those sounds to boost your immune system, to recenter yourself, and to be prepared should you become infected with this or any other disease.
I'm also thinking for all of us that are so weary of being sort of safer at home and not getting to travel as much or be in novel circumstances, I think this is also a great opportunity to take yourself on a little mini vacation. So what a great place to close out.
Yeah, so I will just write, let's see, search. When I say search, I mean Google search, but Google search the Hill Natural Sounds. It'll take you to that article and it'll explain just what you said. This is an opportunity to be safer at home, but still get out and enjoy these natural resources. And really outside of the context of COVID, there are a lot of people around this country that don't have the physical capability, the financial capability, the time to get to the national parks. But these national parks are public lands. They're for everybody. And so again, these sounds are a way for people to get out there with headphones, click play, and experience the parks.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jacob, and everybody who's listening today, and our fabulous captioner. Give them a big shout out as well. And we'll look forward to our next session at 10:30 today, which is a repeat of the radio session and dispatch from a week ago. So new live session, but same content. So thanks, Jacob, and we'll look forward to having a recording for you guys sometime soon.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Bye.